G'day and welcome to another Scouting Australia podcast, powered by Australian Property Scout. I'm here with co-host Jimmy and co-host Sam. I'll be running today's podcast and let's get into it, fellas. What are your thoughts on the topic for today?
Lukey, that was not a bad intro.
It wasn't too bad.
That was Australian Property Scout buys agency, but other than that, mate, it was good. Jimmy, Lukey, welcome, boys. And we're on. We're running with that, Lukey. Well done, mate.
Actually?
The look of pure petrification on his face.
Oh,
actually.
dear. I don't think the listeners are going to like
good.
it.
Man, it was good. People are going to write in. They'll ask for that to stay.
I actually like yours. I've been asked before by clients, does he do it live every time? He does. And I tried to do it. I can't do it as good, but we'll digress. Yeah, good to be
We
here.
have digressed. Yes.
I'm a big fan of it. I think we should keep it Lukey doing everyone.
Okay. Everyone or every single one?
God, here he is. And that is why Lukey was hosting the show.
boys. All right, we're 30 seconds in. We're probably 60 seconds in. We're talking shit. Today, listeners, we are talking all about metro versus regional. It is a debate that has battled through the ages. Jimmy has fought in many of these battles and many other battles alongside. He can fill you in on that at a later date. But metro versus regional, boys, thoughts. It's a chatter that people have always spoken about.
Sammy,
Let's dive into it.
I'm really interested about this topic, and you two being the experts in sourcing properties and understanding strategy and building out people's portfolios, because there's so much chatter out there about people that are either in either camp or they don't believe in buying in both areas. So I really wanted to dispel a lot of the myths for all of our listeners out there to really give them the nuts and bolts of what they should or should not be doing or should and should not be listening to in terms of the wider audience. So what about you, Luke? You probably get this question a lot in terms of your strategy sessions. If people you're proposing something and they're like, no, I don't want to buy in that particular, I don't want to buy regional or what do you think?
I think a large part of it is society. When you look at people coming through as clients, a lot of people do come through, and you would see on your end as well, but people come through and say, no, I need it to be capital. Capitals have faster growth. There's less risk. They're going to outperform, when it's not necessarily the case. There's regionals that have outperformed metros, and there's metros that have outperformed regionals. You have to look at the wider metrics across both. So how small of a regional? Are we talking a 5,000, 10,000 population regional? Or are we talking about a 40, 50, 60,000 population regional? So there's actually a wide spread there. So when people do say that sort of stuff, sometimes they're correct and sometimes they're completely wrong. So there's more to it than that.
Yeah. So straight off the top, Sammy, just to debunk the myth, right?
Yes.
Let's just not hold anything back.
Is this a myth-busting app?
Well, it could be.
It could be.
Right? It could actually be. But in terms of metro and regional, from your perspective, as an investor, should you be choosing one or the other, or should you be buying both?
Man, it's a funny thing because like when I first started out, and for a long time, I was not a regional investor, which is a funny thing because I came from the bush, right? Grew up on a farm. Like it's a funny thing that I was almost always a metro investor. I always like to stay towards capital cities as much as I could. So, man, it wasn't until probably like a fair bit later through my journey that I started to really take good notice, strong notice of regionals and how regionals had performed and were performing. But I think for the most part, man, there was quite a large period there where regionals didn't outperform metros. And I think it always comes down to like the time of cycle it is, like what's going on in the economy, what's been growing at different points in time. And man, really when you drill it all back and you have a really good look at it from that perspective, it's just where's the right place to invest in at the right time. So many capital city markets now have seen exceptional growth over some of them the last 3 to 5 years, some of them the last 10 years, if we look at, say, Sydney. And man, there's just so many opportunities all across the country, and there have been so many opportunities all across the country. But then when we actually drill it into regionals, and obviously COVID kicked a lot of regional areas off, but a lot of those areas that went through really big, strong runs through COVID have actually sort of dipped back and like off a bit. Some of them have come back quite a fair bit, but now there's other regionals that are actually super strong, like powerhouse economies in their own rights. They've got really, really tight housing markets, really, super strong and tight vacancy rates, rental markets, all these sorts of things. And man, so many of them are shaping up and have been shaping up for many years now as really strong candidates for growth. And man, I think if this debate was like an actual thing and you're looking at them closely, like if you went and had a look at most regional locations compared to most metro locations, if you used a 100-year average, they probably would come out almost exactly the same. There'd be a couple that would be slightly off, but like it would be a couple of % different at most from most of the strong regionals. If we're talking, 40,000 to 200,000 people regional cities to then all your big metros, man, there wouldn't be that much disparity, I don't believe, over the very long term. Because if there was, there wouldn't be all these regional markets out there that were still $500,000, $600,000, $700,000. Some of them a lot higher than that, and then capital cities that median house prices are sitting at very similar numbers. You know, 6, 7, 800,000. The only real anomaly is Sydney. But outside of that, but then in 10 years, when we're looking back again, has Sydney kind of had a big plateau period, and everything else again has sort of caught up. So it's one of these things, man. Like the Australian property market literally does work in repeatable cycles, but they just have to be selected at the right timing, the right areas. So, man, for me, it's just like it'll be a good thing to unpack today, but I think what really comes back to, and I think we're going to really come back to this at the back end as well, it's where's shaping up for growth at the right time and having a complete non-bias towards where we're choosing, whether it's metro or regional, whichever camp you've sat in before, because there's always opportunities across both markets.
Do you think it's got to, because one of the points you brought up there, Sammy, about the population in these regional areas, do you think the main reason why people have really misunderstood this or been scared by regional is because there's such a diversity in regional? Like you could have a very small population, then you could have 100,000 people population. So that disparity can really dictate a lot of results in a particular market. So do you think that's where we need to get super clear on when we classify regional, because it's easy to classify metro cities, right? But when we're classifying regional, what would you say, Lukey, to qualify as a regional area that we believe would be as an investing market? What do you reckon?
So the way I look at regionals, it's pretty much anything out of a capital city, realistically. You've got large regionals that are pretty much like minor capital cities within each state to a degree, but they pretty much range anywhere from, 10,000 people up into 200,000, 300,000 people. So you have some pretty large regionals that are very diverse economies that are pretty much self-sufficient. They have very large councils. They have a lot of the budget from the state government actually allocated to them because they're actually very large economies in their own right. So when you look at regionals, exactly what you said before, there is how long is a piece of string? Are we talking about regionals with 10,000, 50,000, 100,000? Because they do change a lot in comparison to how they perform. Like, it's not to say you wouldn't touch a regional that's 15,000 people. It just has to have some really key data pushing it forward because it's not going to have that underlying population pressure that some of your larger regionals or capital cities would have.
I think one of the cool things about regionals as well is because it actually is a smaller city or there's a smaller base, you know what I mean? Like a smaller amount of homes and a smaller population that can be affected. A large project or something moving into an area or having a ripple effect from a capital city or something like that, it can have a massive press on these sorts of areas because it's a more condensed population. So when things change, it can turn into a pressure cooker very quickly. You think about a city like Sydney, 6.5 million people plus, right? Like the amount of pressure and change it would need to move a market, to turn a tide of a market like that is immense. Same as Melbourne. Even when you go like Brisbane, Perth, like these are 2 million plus people population cities. It takes a while for that to actually shift. Whereas when there's a direct shift in a city of, let's say, whether it's 20,000, 50, 200,000 people, it's nowhere near as much of a shift. But there's so many things that are taken into equation because if there was a glut of like land or stock or like whatever for a while before it, obviously it would take a while for that to get eaten up, specifically in something that might be 50, 100, 200,000 people. But if it was already reasonably tight, like most regionals for quite a long time have been reasonably tight, there might be a bit of land that comes on. But in terms of the actual housing stock, they're typically quite tight because normally they don't really like overdevelop in a lot of these areas. They take a while to go to market. There's typically only a few developers that are there. Most people that develop like house and lands and stuff, a lot of the time it's like mum and dad sort of either homeowners or investors in these regions as well. So they can turn very quickly and in a very strong way. And when they do, man, it can really run very quickly because of that side of things too. So I kind of liken it to like a pressure cooker. You know what I mean? Like it's like you have a pot of water on the fire. If it's a small pot, it will start cooking very, very quickly. But the bigger the pot, the more it takes to get that thing to heat and to boiling point. It literally is no different when it comes to capital growth and market movement in a city. The size of it will 100% depend on how quickly it moves and how quickly it can change as well.
So you
and even sorry to cut you off there,
right.
But the supply side of things I'm talking about is the equivalent to putting tap water in, having room temperature water in, or having an ice cold water on the fire before it starts. And the more supply there is, the colder the water and the more that it takes to turn and then change and get to boiling point. So Man, sometimes like these really small regions can turn very, very quickly because of that, supply side.
So a lot of people listening to this have just heard what you've said and they're thinking, okay, but what if it turns the other way? So from a risk perspective, because people are thinking regional, well, it's risky because what if those big projects or something changes, then is that market going to go in a downturn in the opposite? So would you say it's more risky?
I think it always depends. Lukey can jump in here if he wants to as well, like with his opinion. But for me, man, I think with anything that I do, I'm always timing markets, right? So like, if anything, if something's got a population of 6 million people, when the market goes to shit, you're competing with a lot of people to sell a product on the back end. But there's risk at any level, at any market. That'd be the same as 10, 20, 100,000, 6 million people city. Doesn't really matter where it is, especially if you're an in and out sort of style investor. You know what I mean? Timing market cycles and whatnot from that perspective. And I think if you're trying to retire in a decent time frame and get to those income goals in a decent time frame or the equity goals, whatever it is, hanging on through 2 cycles, mate, whether you're doing it in Sydney and between 2003 and 2013, you see no growth or the market comes back, terrible time to hold property in Sydney, or whether you're in a region that's got the same deficit and time frame at the very bottom, when you're in a stagnant period, man, you're in a stagnant period, and remembering the time it took to get there, it'll then take, conversely, a long time to get out of it as well. So, man, I think it really... This is a thing of like people being long-term invest, long-term holds, buy and never sell. That's why I just don't agree with it, because like there's so much, in my opinion, of opportunity cost in that time frame. When it comes to cash flow deals, that's the thing that you need to be very wary of, and it's a different conversation, because cash flow deals, you want to be very wary of a market that you're going to hold for in the long term, and you don't want to be buying something in like late in a cycle and the yields are pretty average and all the rest of the sort of thing if you're going to hold that thing for a very, very long time, because you are more exposed to fluctuations. Whereas if you bought in at the first like 30% of the run or even first 50% of the run and the market does 100% plus, you're more insulated because you bought it significantly cheaper and your rents, would have had a lot of growth, rental growth, price growth as well. So you're more insulated from that side. But again, we need to be, that's why like we're very selective in terms of where we do cash flow deals, because you have a lot more exposure when a market turns from that perspective, because that is an asset that you plan to hold for a very long term, as opposed to a bread and butter capital growth property might be in and out within a 3, 5, 7 year period.
Are you saying, Sammy, though, from a cash flow perspective, that you'd be more selective as to which market you'd be investing in? Or if you were targeting a cash flow property, would both metro or regional still work?
Well, of course they still, like they can, either of them can
but to
still
hold
work.
for the long term.
Yeah, man, it just depends on this is the thing, man, like you could be talking about let's say we talk about, say, Perth for the 15 years between its last boom of late 2000s to pretty much early 2020s, right? It was a 14-year lull period there. I wouldn't really have wanted to hold either property during that time period because, it just wasn't a great time to hold during that period. But neither was Brisbane during its big downturn. Like, this thing in the big downturns, it's not something you kind of want to hold for the very long term. But if you buy in at a very low point in a cycle and then you also debt reduce them over time as well, you're getting the price growth, you're getting the rental growth, all these sorts of things that come through. So even if, like, let's say your peak yields got to like 11 or 12% when you kind of gone through the whole way through the cycle, and then they tip back off at like the 10 to 11, man, you're still going to be very happy with that product and that result. And that's where I think you just have to be very careful where you're putting in for the long term. And I say Perth, but like the stagnant period in Sydney in 2003, 2013 wasn't a great time to be an investor. You know, yields were soft, vacancy rates were soft. There was a glut period. This is where you want to make sure you're debt reduced and you're at a very low debt level to insulate the portfolio over the long term. And this is where holding negatively geared, high cost properties for a very long period of time, man, it doesn't make sense because like it's just going to continually eat into your overall profit of the portfolio. Whereas when you're getting rid of those things and clearing a low yielding, a lot of the time low yielding high cost property, when you're clearing that debt and you're banking those profits, regardless of whether it is a low cost or a high cost, once that property's done its thing, there's no point holding it for another 10 to 15 years. It literally just doesn't make sense because velocity of money, you're going to lose money on that thing from an inflationary perspective of time working against you in that time frame.
Okay. So debt reduction obviously is a really big focus of the strategy, right? So just so being super clear.
Cash flow deals can be done anywhere. You just want to be careful, like, you know what I mean? Like that it isn't going to be hyper exposed over the long term.
Got it. Lukey, any
I think
thoughts?
as well, like mentioned before, with society's views on it, there's horror stories out there, and that's what a lot of people hold on to, and scares them a lot, especially with some of these very small regionals or even very small populations. Like when you look at a regional, you're generally looking for a diverse economy, as you are in a metro market. You're looking for multiple large employers that are going to have a long lifespan in that area, that are going to continue to employ people, continue to grow, and that's going to drive a large portion of that economy. When you look at some of these smaller regionals that are heavily based on one single mine or a big manufacturer, or, there's one out in Kingaroy, a big sun pork factory, and that's like one of their largest employers out there. Like when you
How do you know that, Lukey?
I used to go out there
Just for the pork.
just for the pork, mate. I love a good pork crackle.
We've heard.
So when you look at even like an area like Chinchilla, it had growth from 150 up to like 500,000, and there's currently people with negative mortgages because when the mine or the gas left, people left with it, and people couldn't sell their property. And the bank won't let them sell the property because they're not going to have.
Sell it for enough to clear the debt.
Yeah, they're not going to have a 200 grand mortgage against nothing, so they have to secure it with something. So, yeah, there's some sad situations with that. And that's where a lot of those horror stories or things stick in the back of people's minds. But they're very rare occurrences, and those markets weren't analysed properly, and they were reliant on one source of employment. So, when you think about regionals, it shouldn't be like that. You're looking for large economies that, yes, they're not a metro market, but they have standalone. They have their own councils. They have their own large employers. And let's say, for example, a lot of people are like, you don't invest anywhere there's a mine. Some of these larger mines that have 30, 40-year lifespans in them, and they've only just begun, they're not going anywhere. If you're getting into that market and getting out and going to sell out in 5-6 years.
But it's also like, what is the town that we're looking at that might be in proximity to that? Because if it's got 30, 40 years and the town's 30, 50, 100,000 people, it's like that town isn't just there because of the mine. It's not like as soon as that mine leaves or is wrapped up or is finished or whatever, the game's over. Like there is literally a population base. You can't just leave. 80,000 people will not leave. Your Chinchilla examples and stuff, there are a couple of thousand people.
Yeah.
So then when they go through a significant boom and people are buying in high because the rents are high because they're only there for a short period of time, and the mining companies go in there and they just rent all the stocks so they can house their people. But then as soon as they're done, they're out, bang, they're gone, values drop again as well. So I think this is where you just really have to understand the underlying, as Luke is saying here, economy of the area and the drivers of the area. And as long as they're there over the very long term, all major capitals, all major regionals, when areas go through booms, they have a nice big upswing, and it might be both rents and prices. When they come off the top, they all dip off a little bit because once that heat goes out of the market, it comes back that level of new equilibrium up near the top, but it's not at the top anymore because the heat's gone. And that's just normal regardless of what market it is. But as long as you've bought into an area that's sustainable for the long term and it's a good, strong economy there regardless, then it doesn't matter. Like, it's good. Like, that area will continue to perform for you over long term. And that's when we're talking about, obviously, the cash flows. As capital growth investors, we like to get in, get out, make our profit and move on.
And when you're thinking about affordable areas, Sammy, do you think the rise of metro markets from an investment perspective has really just come down to price point and just affordability for people to get into the market?
From an investing perspective?
Yeah,
for sure. I mean, now most capitals are moving they're moving up towards $1 million each, like all of them. They're all getting within sort of proximity of that, except for your smaller ones that maybe don't have as much going on. But yeah, man, they're pretty much all from a median value getting to that sort of price point. A lot of regionals now are, sort of chasing that and sort of getting to the similar sorts of pricing, man. So it's going to be interesting to watch how the next kind of 3 to 5 years play out, specifically if the housing crisis continues for the next 3 years, which I think it will. I don't think we'll catch up. Build costs are too expensive at the moment. So I think it's going to take a while for it to catch up. So if we continue for another 2 to 3 years of significant housing pressure, I think a lot of these regionals are going to stay within the touching distance of capitals like they mostly have always been. So yeah, man, I think it's going to be really interesting to watch out and watch play out. And I think when we rewind to like around about this time last year, we did the Super Boom episode. We did the episode that turned into the Super Boom episode. This is literally what we were going into, you know? And like people were like saying, it's not going to happen. It's not going to play like that. Man, there's locations that have done 40% plus growth already this year. There's regional locations that have done 30% growth plus this year. Like, man, we're in full effect of that thing. And the only thing slowing it down is when they reach affordability caps in those areas, in those regions.
Do you think it's also when people look at major cities and they see road projects and they see infrastructure getting done, because they're impacted by it and you're actually seeing it on the road, you're thinking, well, there's a lot of stuff happening around here. But in the regional markets, how important do you think, government projects or infrastructure projects, because people don't see it, they don't understand?
Well, it's when they happen in a regional center, what people got to remember is like, because it's a much smaller and more condensed population, if they're doing like $1 billion project, which might be say a rail or a transport project or something like that, that's going to bring a lot of like high net worth or high income people into the area.
Luke, you try to eat the microphone.
a lot of high income people in the area, right? And man, when that happens, that puts pressure on rents immediately. So we see that surge, and then that a lot of the time will transition over into price growth from that side as well. So it's like, man, the impact that those things can have on a market are significantly stronger in a regional because it's a smaller market, and $1 billion or even $500 million or $1 billion in a regional market is a lot. Let's say 100,000 people population is a lot more than even say like a Brisbane or a Perth with 2 million plus each, or an Adelaide, a little over 1 million people. Like when it's such a smaller, more condensed population, projects of that size have a significantly high impact on those smaller areas, smaller populations.
And the government. I was just going to say, and the government's not going to do all these infrastructure projects if they don't believe the population is going to be growing in those areas, correct?
Yeah.
Which is going to have a flow-on effect to the supply and demand and
100%.
so forth.
I mean,
so
man,
it's just
dude,
feeding into it, right?
If they're spending $1 billion on a region, or if they're spending, $1 billion, $2 billion, refurbishing a hospital, and then another on improving road and infrastructure, and even improving livability, lifestyle of all these locations, they're expecting more people to work out there. They to live out there and to work out there, and that place is not going anywhere anytime soon.
I think the big thing with regionals as well is, the way society's moving is everyone's talking about renewable energies. Everyone wants clean energy and solar farms and wind farms and all of this stuff that they're trying to bring to market, but no one wants to see it. No one wants it in their backyard. No one wants it in a capital city. So the government's basically in a tough position where they're like, well, I can't put it in a metro. Where am I going to put it? I'm going to have to invest in these regionals to house a lot of this. Some of your big solar farms, your wind farms, all this renewable energy they're bringing out, it has to go somewhere. No one wants to look at it. So it's going to go into some of these regionals across the country. No one knows exactly what state and where they're going. But, over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, regionals will have a pretty big demand on the back of that.
Especially as they're moving away from coal, right? So they're moving like a lot away from coal powered, and that's because we've got these goals and targets from the renewable energies and all that sort of thing to transition away from fossil fuels. And man, that's only going to increase more and more in the future. So yeah, but this is just one small piece of all the different things that are within it. And it's just different drivers across the board for so many different things. And man, I think this is where we literally drill back. We go right back to the point that I said, we're probably going to talk about this at the very end, but we brought it up at the very, very start. It's literally all about like market fundamentals, market affordability, what's going on in the area, what's going to drive an area, all these sorts of things. I don't care where it is or anything about it from that perspective. If it's strategically positioned near things like Lukey's talking about, or plenty of other sorts of styles of projects, and the pressure is going to be there, the affordability is there, the market movement potential is there, then man, everything's lining up for that market to move into a strong capital growth period. And that's all we want, man. That's literally what we're out there, what we're chasing for, and what we want to put ourselves and our clients into, because that's going to give us the results. So like to fully hit the nail on the head and to not drag this thing out into a 2-hour episode, man, realistically, it doesn't matter. Metro, regional, it does not matter. We've seen ridiculous growth rates across both. And if anything, I'd kind of say, like, if you want great wins, a lot of the time, like, where can you look that's going to give you a great win in a shorter period? And like I was kind of using that analogy before, what's going to pressure cook more quickly? And if the opportunity is there, sometimes that can give you a more rapid return more quickly.
Yeah, the thing that just springs into my mind is from a strategy perspective, and just tying into what you said, how many people do you think that would only buy in metro markets, but because they're priced out, they've been waiting on the sidelines for, like, say, in between purchases, maybe 3-5 years, compared to the investor that's due to their strategy, maybe had a metro property but went regional, continue to accumulate, and then came back into that metro market, that compounding nature and the velocity of money and the missed opportunities that the metro-only investor has done, you probably would have seen that plenty of times.
Yeah, man. I think it all depends on what it comes down to. Because, like, man, like if we dial it back to like 2 to 3 years ago, like if we're looking at that sort of horizon, man, like Brisbane, Perth, Adelaide were all great places to be buying and holding properties in. Saw a huge amount of growth in. Probably a couple of years ago, we started transitioning a lot of people into some different regionals that are out there now that have similarly have had massive growth runs. There's a few of the markets that we're kind of gearing up to actually start exiting out of because of the immense amount of growth that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years. And so, man, it really depends. Like, but there's just so many different opportunities. But if you're so close to just like, no, I'm just this style of investor, or I'm just a metro investor, or I'm just a regional investor, you're doing the same thing as man. It's just a silly position to put yourself in, because you're doing yourself out of, let's say, half the markets in the country that might actually be the hyper performers at this point in time. So, man, I'm just I have no discrimination against either or whatever. So whatever is going to be the best performing market that's going to give me the best result that I put my money in, that's all I care about.
Now, we often talk about risk just because we're near the end. But how important, Sammy, for using a buyer's agent, like for a lot of people buying in a metro city, they'll feel a bit safe. But if you're going regional and you're doing it on your own, being aware compared to using an expert who knows exactly what markets, what you should be doing. I mean, just for the person listening out there thinking, I'm going to go out and start looking at regional on my own. Should they be concerned?
There's a lot more to consider. Like there's so many. We pull. There's 9 different data sources that we pull from, and when I say pull from, like, spend many thousands of dollars each month pulling data. This isn't data that's, very openly already compiled into a report or something like that, right? There's all these different sort of things that we pull together to make decisions on where we're investing. And I literally go through to cancel locations out, not to find locations. We go through to cancel locations out to see what we're left with. And then we analyze those areas. And, man, I think, like, unless you want to buy into an area that's already running, so it gives you a feeling of security from that side. But then again, do you understand the affordability metrics and how much growth that area has left in the tank? Because that's the safest bet, is buy into an area that's already running. But do you understand it well enough? But then if you're going to go and you're going to try and time the market bottom of another area, that is a completely different kettle of fish. It's a completely different battle. And there's so many things to understand around the intricacies of that to make sure you don't get burned. Man, it's one of these things. If you put enough time, effort, energy, research, spend enough money on it to overlay all these things yourself as well, then man, like you potentially still could get it right. But mate, it's just like, the way I always look at it is it's not what something costs you, it's what it's going to make you. You know what I mean? And when that balance is in your favor, you're going to make the correct decision. You're going to be buying in, where the experts and where the research is telling that it is the correct location to put into for your budget, your brief, your strategy at this point in time. Then, man, you're 10xing your possibilities of guarantee, of positive results, rather than throwing the dart at the board and really hoping it hits the mark.
I think we've absolutely nailed it. Any closing comments from you, Lukey?
I think the biggest thing is, whether it's metro or regional, you can sit in both markets and make no money. It all comes back to the pressure indicators. So, there's been plenty of people that have been burnt in at metro and burnt in regional. So if you don't have your economic indicators, we like to call them pressure indicators. We want to be looking for the pressure in the market, what's going to force it forward. If you're not spot on that and knowing what you're going in there for and how long, and you can be burnt in any market. So, there's plenty of markets out there that will outperform metro, and there's metros that will outperform regional. So, my biggest thing is you need to look at the pressure indicators.
You need to understand your strategy, man. Hugest part. What do you need in your strategy? What price points are you at? Where and what do you need in your portfolio now? And then just don't rule anything out. And see where it comes to. That's literally what we do when we select area. Like we weigh everything out and see where we have left, dial in, get it all done. And then when we're assessing a client's portfolio from a strategy perspective, okay, well, what out of the locations that we have and then the deal types that you need in your portfolio, what aligns and suits up for where we need to go source that property for you in the portfolio? And man, when all that stuff lines up, we're typically left with a few locations that specifically suit this investor's style of brief, and then we go out and we hunt specific for that brief.
Yeah, I think you absolutely nailed it, Sammy. Well done, Lukey. Anything else that, Sammy, that you want to say? I think we're pretty concise.
I think it's good, man. I think it's good. We didn't need to go too crazy on this thing, man. I think it's good just to kind of iron out the fact that literally it does not matter either metro, regional. If you're buying in the right market, it'll do the right things for you and be the right, investment within the portfolio as well. So anything you boys want to sign off with? All good. Beautiful. Boys, thanks for joining me as always. Lukey, thank you for the introduction. Listeners, I hope you enjoyed the episode and Lukey's favorite new introduction, or Jimmy's new introduction with Lukey. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please make sure you send it on to someone else that you think could also take some great value from this episode. We want you to keep growing, building the circle of influence that are thinking, talking, and acting the way that we do about property and the way that you're moving your mindset around property as well. If you haven't left us a 5-star review yet, please jump on, leave us that 5-star review. And if you are not following us yet on your favorite listening platform, please hit the follow or the subscribe button, and makes us, and guarantees that we know that you love what we're doing. We can keep punching on. And until next week, guys, it's another Scouting Australia podcast.